Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. We are now moving on to removal of the turbo, which is pretty exciting, I think. So we've made it a long ways, and as you can see, the turbo is now quite exposed here. It actually looks like it's in pretty good shape, even though we're not going to be reusing it. But regardless, that is the plan. So I've come to the conclusion that we're definitely going to need to remove this downpipe as well to remove the turbo, as well as my wideband, which you can see there. We're going to first start by removing this turbo shield. I actually ended up cutting this turbo shield to get it to fit the downpipe. So if any of you are curious about that, you can shoot me a message or shoot me a comment actually, and I could do a video on that if you guys are interested. But it's much cheaper than having to pay like 70 bucks or however much they are for a turbo shield, and this one actually fits better. It hugs the turbo, and I think probably hugs the downpipe better, and probably acts as a better shield than any of those aftermarket ones. So I was happy to just reuse it, and it was actually pretty quick to do. It only took like maybe 10 minutes. So something to consider. But we're going to go ahead and get started with removal of this downpipe. And like I said, we'll probably actually remove the wideband sensor, the downpipe, and then the turbo in order. But first, we're going to have to get this shield out of the way. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay guys, so let's go ahead and work on getting this cover out of the way here. This is the turbo cover. So there is a bolt down here. Hopefully you guys can see that. I went ahead and loosened it. I was able to just use the electric ratchet and get it in there, but it's kind of hard to film. But you can see that bolt right there. I think it should be loose enough to get off by hand, which it is. Okay, so we got that one bolt down there is now out of the way. And then we have two additional bolts over here, which I think I can use the electric ratchet for as well. So both these essentially are on the driver's side. Hopefully you can see that one and that one. I'm using a 10 mil here for all of these. These come off pretty easy. And like I mentioned before, I was able to cut this turbo cover when I installed this downpipe, so it's pretty easy to do. I'd recommend doing it over just buying a new one. It's cheaper and works better, I think. And all three of those are the same size. Perfect, that's it. So you can see where I cut this out here on the back side of it. Basically, I just marked it and cut it with a Dremel, just like one of the cutoff wheels in a Dremel. It doesn't look gorgeous from this side, but from this side, it's completely stock. I didn't adjust this, and it fits really snug. So it's kind of my preference. So we'll put that away. So now we've got a clear view here of the turbo. So we need to get this downpipe off next. We also need to remove this mount here. I already, as you can see, have this little oxygen sensor socket that I put here. I went ahead and actually loosened this as well, but this is just a regular ratchet that you put in here, and then you just loosen that guy up. Let me get this guy out of the way, and then we should be able to just disconnect this or unscrew this. I had this zip tied way up here so that it would look nice, but I unzip tied it that way I could kind of twist the whole wire. I like to do this. I don't like twisting the wire a whole bunch in one spot, just because I don't want to damage anything. So I kind of try and spread the twist, I guess, throughout an extended portion of the wire just to try and prevent any damage. So that came out really without any issue. So I'm going to be careful. I don't really want to touch the tip of that oxygen sensor. I'm going to go ahead and just move this guy out of the way. Probably just set him over here. I think that'll be okay right there for now. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get this cover out of the way here, or this bracket. So there's 2 bolts holding this bracket on. We've got a 12 here, and then we've got a 12 here. Those should come off pretty easily, I would imagine. So we will grab a 12 millimeter. We're gonna need a decent size extension. We'll go ahead and grab the long one here. And let's just see if that looks like it'll work. And so it'll work good for this one. For the other one, I think we may need a bit of a wobbly. So let's go ahead and get the one without the wobbly first. This guy right here. So that guy came off pretty easy. And then I'm gonna grab this other extension that I have here. This one's actually from Harbor Freight. It's a Pittsburgh one, but the tip of it allows a little bit of wobble to the ratchet, or to the socket. So sometimes I'll use this if there's just a pinch of wobble needed, but I don't want to use like a full-on wobbly. And actually, I'm not able to get on this very well. So what I might do, I'm gonna loosen this with just a 12 millimeter wrench first, just to make sure I'm gonna be able to break this guy loose, because I do not want to risk stripping this guy out. Okay, that came loose pretty quick actually. It looks like it's already been stripped to some degree. And then I've got a little ratchet wrench here. I'll go ahead and just use this. I'm not sure, hopefully you guys are able to see that back there. But I'll go ahead and do this just to remove the remainder of this little bracket here. And this bracket essentially spans from here over and then connects to the valve, not to the valve cover, but to the injector cover, that big metal injector cover that looks similar to this. It connects over to that. And then this is also part of the mount for the top mount. So we're not going to want to lose this, because I believe that the top mount actually secures to this, the top mount intercooler. Let's see if this is finger tight. It is. And we are getting it off here. Perfect. These look like they're about the same length, so not overly worried about losing the position for these two. Yeah, they're like exactly the same length. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this over here with this guy. And I've got 2 more bolts kind of in this category, and it looks like all of these are the same. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put these in this bag with this other mount. So I'm gonna have this one, and I'll just put those all together right there for now. Okay, so we got that out of the way. So now it looks like we can continue removing this downpipe. So this downpipe is a bit of a bear to get off actually. So there's essentially these 2 studs here. Actually, I'm sorry. These are the 2 bolts up here. Let's see if I can light this up a little bit better for you. So bolt, this one is a stud, this one is a stud, and then there's a stud on the very bottom. So there's 5 altogether, I believe. And I actually went ahead and removed the one on this aspect here just to make sure I could, because it's kind of a bear to get to. And the one on the bottom middle, I went ahead and loosened it because it's very difficult to get to. So let's get these 3 off right here. And then what I'll do is go underneath to get the remainder of that bottom one that I'm not able to reach until we slide this intake out, or the downpipe out. So the problem with this downpipe is that it's the bolt, or the nut rather sits really close to it on the other side of this guy. So it's very difficult to even get it on. I wasn't even able to get a ratchet on it. So I'm gonna be careful that I'm on here well, and I'm gonna see if I can't break this loose. Okay, that's pretty tight. Preferably, I would get a closed end on this wrench on there, but I'm unable to. Sometimes what it can take is a little bit of penetrant to break these loose. But I just put this on, so I feel like I should be able to get it off fairly easy. Let's give it another go here. Oh man, I feel like I might be at risk for stripping that guy. Let's pass that guy up. This guy also is extremely tight. Okay, so that's not very reassuring. So when it's that tight, I prefer to use a socket if possible. So let me see if I can bring the light over here for you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and maybe clip the light right up here. That's not working very well. Maybe that's a little better. Okay, so we've got this guy right here and this guy right here are very tight, as is this guy. So what I do have is this cheater bar here. So I went ahead and put this little connector, bringing this down to a 3/8 drive. All right, we're gonna use this to try and break this guy loose. That worked, it broke it loose, but that guy is quite tight. So now we broke this loose, but the nut unfortunately is turning, so we're gonna need to hold this nut as, there we go. Okay, now we've got it loose. So I'm just gonna reiterate what I mentioned before, especially when it comes to these tight parts. You really want to take your time and make sure that you are dead straight on these nuts before trying to break them loose, because you are going to hate yourself if you strip these guys out. And even by taking your time, it's still very possible, but all right, let's, wow. And like I mentioned before, the penetrant can work really well if you just can't break something loose. You basically use like a penetrating oil. Sometimes you have to do that with exhaust parts. I didn't think that these were going to be so bad, since I just put them on within the past couple of months. But apparently they're pretty tight still. Okay, so that one is loose-ish. Okay, so those three are loose, or those two are loose. Now let's see if I can get this one down here. Kind of the same thing. This one is a stud, so hopefully you can see, but there's no nut to hold. So really these are the only two where there's nuts to hold on the back side, which makes it more of a pain, of course. Okay, so now that I've got these broken loose, I'm going to switch and no longer use this. And actually, if I could use this power ratchet, this would speed things up a lot. So I'm going to see if we can sneak the power ratchet in here, which I don't think we can. We might be able to on these two. I don't think we can on this one. It's just too tight. So let's see if we can just fit a small ratchet in there for this one. And that might work. Okay, we've got the small ratchet. There we go, it's finally coming loose. Okay. And so these ones, we don't need to pay attention to where they go because they are all the same length. So hopefully you can see, but this guy is indeed coming loose. Exhaust parts are not fun to deal with. Okay, here we go. So we got the nut off of this stud here. And then now we need to work on continuing these two. So let's see if we can indeed use this to remove them. That one, no. This one, I think we can. We'll go ahead and hold this back end. Yep, that's coming. That's working. Be careful not to lose that nut. So for now. Okay, so you can see what this looks like. So this is actually a bolt with a nut. The other one's a stud with a nut. And then we've got this final one here. I think this final one we may end up needing to use a ratchet with a short extension. Sometimes you just kind of have to play around until you find what works, and sometimes it can be very difficult. There we go. This looks like a position that works. We're going to hold the back end here and turn, and this is actually coming apart pretty easily, as you can see here. And we've got this bracket on here that's coming loose with it. This may actually be hand tied. It is hand tied. Okay. So, and then that's the bracket for the turbo shield, obviously. Okay, we've got that. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. And I'm just throwing these in here as I go. Okay, so there should only be one less left. So this thing should actually be loose, which it is. Fantastic. So now I'm going to go underneath. And let's see if we can get this off. So I may have mentioned this before, but sometimes what I'll do when I'm working underneath the car, or even working on a certain section, is I'll try and just throw everything I need in a little bin to bring with me. So I'm going to need this 15. I'm going to need a 17, which is already down there. I'm going to grab both of these. Basically anything that I think I might need, I'm going to grab. That way I don't have to go up and down over and over and over again, which can be really annoying. I'm going to grab a flashlight, and I'm going to grab the ratchet wrench, and hopefully that's everything we need. Let's find out. So I'm going to try and bring you guys down here with me just to show you the remaining steps of getting this off. But I don't know how great the footage is going to be. Okay, this is the downpipe here. So you can see I went ahead and disconnected that at the midpoint. So that's where it connects to the catback, which is basically from the downpipe back, that's the catback. So I disconnected those. This is kind of the bracket or hanger that's just keeping this suspended. So I didn't remove that. And then if you follow the downpipe up to the turbo, so you can now see those nuts that have been removed, and then there's one remaining nut. That's the one I told you about that's super hard to get to because of this terrible downpipe design. You can see how close that nut is to the downpipe. So you actually kind of have to loosen the downpipe before you can even get this all the way off. So I'm hoping, there we go, this is actually finger tight, thank goodness. So I believe that I'm getting this off right now. Oh, it's really close. So see, it's continuing to hit on the downpipe, so I need to pull this downpipe back, which is hard to do because it's still attached to the catback. Okay, I think I'm going to need a tool, which is this 14, to get it the rest of the way. It's super close. And a lot of times, if all else fails and you can't get a power tool in there, you just have to do it by hand, which takes forever. And you'll find yourself turning nuts just a pinch at a time, which is very frustrating. I feel like this guy is basically off. I almost think it is off. It's just wedged there between the thread and the curve of the downpipe. There we go. Got it. Okay, see how tight that is though? Hopefully you can see how tight that is. Okay, so we're going to set that in here. And then we are going to remove this guy right here all the way, which is a 14. The bolts down there may vary. On my car, when I originally bought it, there were some really strange bolts kind of holding the cat back to the downpipe. I'm not sure what the standard is. On my other car, they were kind of strange as well, so I couldn't guarantee you what the normal setup is. Okay, so then what you do here is you push that, and this guy pops right off. I'm going to go ahead and set that back in here just so that we don't lose that bolt. Okay. And you know what? Something else I should probably have done. I don't know if it's necessary, but a lot of times what I'll do is actually suspend this, because really the only thing holding this in place right now on this end is the downpipe. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually go ahead and grab some zip ties and secure this up to this metal bracket just so that this doesn't drop down and do any damage to it on the back end. So let me grab a couple of zip ties. I should have done this ahead of time, but I'll kind of show you guys what I do with zip ties. And I do this quite often to hold all sorts of things. Exhaust pieces, you can use it pretty much for anything. You can see that I've used it here to hold this AC tubing out of the way, but zip ties work great. So typically what I'll do is just connect a few together. That way we don't risk damaging this cat back. I'm not going to be reusing the cat back, but I still don't want to damage it because it is a pretty nice one. Okay, so we will go back under. Be careful not to damage the camera. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, we want to secure this to, whoop, see that's falling already. So what I'm gonna do, ow, this can be tough to do one-handed, but essentially I'm gonna run this through here. Okay, and then I probably could have done this just with two. Uh-oh, and this is literally about to fall. There we go. So now we have that cat back secure, and now we can completely break the connection between these two guys, hopefully. And there actually is kind of a piece of tube in here holding these together. Wow, there's a lot of water that came out of that guy. Huh, okay. So now that that's broken, that's disconnected. The cap back to the downpipe hanger. And this guy here up front, we can just pull this guy back like that. And he just literally slides right out. And we'll set him down. I can't believe how much moisture there is in there. That is wild. Okay, I am gonna grab my ratchet because we are going to be needing that. But let's take a look up here at this end of the turbo. Okay, so this is the back of the turbo. So this is the gasket that connects to the downpipe, obviously. We're gonna be removing that. And then this guy right here is the up pipe. So you can see that the up pipe actually has this metal like protector around it, and it broke for some reason. So I actually used some wire to prevent this thing from rattling around. It's kind of a hack fix, but I didn't want to have to remove the turbo and remove the up pipe and all that. Anyway, I want to take a good look at it. I don't think that the up pipe tubing itself is damaged. I just think it's kind of this plastic, or not plastic, but this thin metal cover. It's like a heat shield. Basically the entire exhaust, not the headers, but the exhaust manifold has it as well. Anyway, we need to remove this up pipe from the turbo. So we need to take this bolt, or actually it looks like a nut. This is another stud with a nut, and we need to remove those. And then there's another stud with a nut right here. So let's see if we can get those off. All right, we're gonna go back up to the top to get a better look at that. Remember to grab all our tools here. Okay, one thing I do want to do is I want to set all these bolts aside so that I don't lose them. So we've got 2 bolts, we've got a total of 5 nuts. So we are going to go ahead and label these guys. Boom, boom, boom. We'll go ahead and just throw this whole little bracket in here, and then we're gonna go ahead and put turbo to downpipe. Boom. Okay, we got that out of the way. We also have these 3 guys right here, and since we want to remember where these guys go, these are going to go to the turbo heat shield. So we're just going to go heat shield, and we'll go ahead and hook these up. And I'm going to organize all this stuff later, but for now I just want to try and get this turbo off if we can. Okay, so we're now going to work on removing these bolts like I mentioned, or these nuts rather. So it looks like there is another nut right there up front, if you can see it. 1 on the side and then 2 on the back. So we've got a total of 4 studs with nuts holding the turbo to the up pipe. Let's go ahead and remove this gasket and just get this guy out of the way. We'll set him over there. And I'm gonna go ahead and just leave this guy here for now. Okay, so those all look like 14s. So let's see what we can do here. We're gonna need a really long extension. We're probably gonna need a wobbly. We may need a full-blown wobbly, but let's start with just one of these little cheater wobblies. So that actually fits pretty well right there. So this is the front one. Hopefully you guys can see that down there. This is the front bolt connecting the up pipe to the turbo. Once again, be very, very, very careful that we don't strip this guy. We may actually have to use penetrant on these. Oh, I was lucky. You can actually break ratchets and extensions on this stuff too, so keep that in mind. it pays to switch to a bigger tool if you have to sometimes. Okay, so that one came off with a decent amount of pressure. Okay, so we can see that down there. Here, I'll show you with a flashlight if that helps. That's the front one right in there. Let's get to the side one now. That one looks pretty accessible. So that's the side one. Okay, we're on there pretty well. That guy's tight. That guy is very tight. So I feel like I might actually break either the ratchet or the socket or the extension. So I'm gonna switch to something a little bit stronger. So I do have these. These are 1/2-inch drives, so they're a little bit stronger. Actually, they're a lot a bit stronger. This is a 14, I believe. These are deep well, which isn't the best. Plus they're a pain in the butt to actually remove. In this case, I just pry them out with a screwdriver. But this is gonna be way stronger, guys. Okay, let's go ahead and grab a thick extension. We're gonna go ahead and use this breaker bar, and as you can probably tell, this is a much beefier setup for removing this guy. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm on there straight. I want to be on there damn straight. Okay, I think it broke loose. Yep, it broke loose. Okay, so now that it's broken loose, let's actually see if we can get the back ones to break loose while we've got this powerful tool out. So sometimes you have to do this by feel. This might take a little bit of practice to make sure you're on there straight by feel. But be damn sure that you are. Okay, that one wasn't too bad. And then there's one next to it. Sometimes if you're unsure, it's smart to just start with the socket itself and make sure that you're on there well. And then, oh my gosh, that was tight. And then you can go ahead and put the entire tool on. It's a little easier to feel sometimes. Okay, so that worked well. So this guy broke loose pretty easy. Whoops, I've got that turned the wrong way. There we go. Okay, so that's another one off. Boom. And there's two back here. These are hard to see, but I kind of showed you earlier from below the car. That one came off really well. Once these break loose, they normally come off pretty well. Boom. Okay, so we've got all four of the nuts here for the up pipe. One thing I should mention here, when it comes to removing difficult nuts or bolts or whatever, you want to use a 6-point socket. So I'll show you the difference here, for those of you that don't know. So this would be a 6-point socket. See how you've got 6 flat edges here? This is a 12-point. So you've got all these little rims, or all these little notches. So this is going to give you much better grab of the bolt and much less chance that it's going to strip compared to this. So if you're working on something that's tight, I always would recommend grabbing a 6-point instead of a 12-point. And also just try and grab a quality tool. Okay, now I actually believe that the turbo is loose now. Okay guys, next steps on this turbo removal. So what I did not do was remove what I believe this is the oil feed line. Then we've got 2 coolant lines here, and then I believe that the oil return line is down there. It's kind of difficult to see, but it's going to be that guy right there with that kind of loop-de-loop looking clamp, spring clamp. So what I did go ahead and do was I was able to bring these in here, and I was able to grab this spring clamp right here, and then I just popped it off onto the metal to get it out of the way. And I did kind of break this loose, obviously, because I didn't want you to have to sit there and watch me do it. But what I did was I grabbed this and kind of wiggled it like I like to do. And as I wiggled this, I'm just going to pull on this coolant line. There we go, and that popped right off. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of shove that over here out of the way for now. And then as far as this right here, which is the oil feed line, essentially it's going to be 2 17mm wrenches. I actually had to use an 11/16 and a 17 because I didn't have 2 17s, but it worked really well, and this just broke loose this top portion here, and I believe this will probably be hand tight from here. So perfect, and that looked like that disconnected pretty well. This can also be disconnected up here, but that would have been more difficult to fish the turbo out, so I went with this one. So now there should only be one connection left holding this turbo, I believe, which is going to be this hose clamp that I just mentioned down here. Grab the flashlight on it one more time. So I'm going to see if I can break this hose clamp loose just to get it out of the way. There we go. That actually came loose pretty well. This is a low pressure hose, I believe. Basically, this tube just allows the oil to dump from the turbo back into the engine. So that is out of the way. So this guy should be loose. I may have to pry a little bit to get that guy free. Maybe, or maybe it'll just come right off. It actually looks pretty loose. Okay, we're gonna go for it. Let's see if this turbo is willing to come off. So I'm gonna slide this PCV guy out of the way, and we are going to wiggle away at this turbo, and look at that, boom. We have ourselves a turbo. All right, that actually came off pretty well, guys. Nice. It looks like it's really in pretty good shape. I think that's... yeah, there's a little bit of play. I don't know how much play is normal, to be honest. Oh, we got a little bit of a leak here. I'm gonna go ahead and set this on the ground. But yeah, that came out pretty darn well. Now we can move on to installing this guy. One step closer to installing this guy. All right, I'm gonna clean up this coolant because I don't want my cat to be drinking it. No coolant for you, Puff. Good boy. Okay, so now let's take a look at the engine compartment here. So we can clearly see the up pipe here. So essentially it looks like these were the 3 bolts that were actually securing the turbo on. Let's take a look here. So really there were only 3. It looks like this one really is just... oh, I remember now. This one here essentially is just a nut securing the up pipe with this mounting bracket here. So what I'm gonna do, guys, I'm gonna inspect this up pipe really well. Make sure that I'm not even remotely worried that it could possibly be cracked. If it is, then I'll probably go ahead and replace it, I guess. I'm trying to avoid replacing it because what I'd like to do after this setup here with the 1.5, I want to go to a rotated setup as my next set of upgrades after I've tuned this setup. And I'm not sure if that's going to require a special up pipe or not, so I hate to buy an up pipe twice. but I guess I could always sell it if I have to. So anyway, for next steps, I'm going to go ahead and inspect this guy, make sure that he's good to go. I am going to cover some of these things. As you can see here, I went ahead and covered the ports here from the intake manifold into the heads. You do not want junk falling in there. The same as this guy right here. I don't want junk falling into this engine. So I'm going to go ahead and cover that off. Even this line right here, this oil feed line for the turbo, I'm probably going to cover off. And then from there, I'll get back with you guys. And I think the next step is going to be just to complete this secondary air pump delete. Now that we've got room in here, we may have to take the up pipe off even to do that. I'm not quite sure. But I'm going to go ahead and remove these solenoids, assess the up pipe, get everything covered up, get the garage cleaned up a little bit here, get those backing plates installed, and we are just about ready to start with the new upgrades, guys. So this is pretty exciting. Like I said, I cannot wait to get this new turbo in. I've always wanted to run one of these. This guy is supposed to be really the fastest spooling, pretty good horsepower turbo in the stock location area. So I've heard this thing will make right around 500 on E85, but still spool up really quick and be great for a daily driver. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for. But yep, we made fantastic progress today, guys. So I'll be back at you with the next steps video here coming up soon. Thanks for following along.